All right, so if you're a bass player, in particular, if you're a gospel or Christian bass player, you're going to have to learn how to drive a song. Here's what I mean. Oftentimes in church, we'll play these songs, and a lot of times these songs will get extended. They will build in intensity, and sometimes it's a little different from what we hear on the record, and we have to learn in the moment, how do we build this song? How do we keep driving this song, for lack of better words? How do we continue to build the intensity? Well, in this lesson, what I want to teach you how to do is get good at driving songs. So stay tuned. All right, so we're getting right into this lesson. And for this lesson today, I'm going to be using several different songs just to make my point. Because as I said, if you're a gospel or Christian bassist, it's going to be very wide. There's a wide array of songs that we can kind of pick because gospel and Christian music is so vast. And almost, I feel like I might have to do a two-part lesson. So do me a favor, if you're watching all the way to the end of the video, make sure you let me know at the end of the video if you feel like I need to do a second part or maybe even a third part to this video. It might have to be a series because there's so much to cover with this particular topic. I can't get it all in one lesson, but I'm gonna do my best today to try to break down as much as I can and give you guys some tools that you can take away to be able to start driving songs better. All right, so the first thing I want to point out with this particular topic is point number one. Don't underestimate the power of sitting still. Well, what do I mean by that? Don't underestimate the power of just sitting right there in the groove. When I think about driving a song, I'm a country boy. I'm from Mississippi. The first thing that comes to my mind is gospel quartet when we talk about drive. And so for that example, I'm going to use this track that I created. And this track is in the key of C, by the way. All right, so as you hear in that example, it's a very basic drive. Now that thing in a gospel quartet groove, we can do that for hours, literally, and it goes, I mean, it just keeps growing and growing. And if you played in gospel quartet music, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or if you've heard gospel quartet music, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's called a drive. At least that's one variation of a drive. All I'm doing with that drive, just in case somebody wants to know, I'm playing a major pentatonic over. That's like a dominant sounding groove, which means the chords would sound like this. Right? You got that dominant or bluesy kind of sound with that C dominant. And all I'm playing over that is just a C major pentatonic. 1, 3, 5, 6, 1, 6, 5, 7, 1. All I'm doing I'm just keeping it very simple. So and you hear me using those ghost notes in my right hand. All right, to not drag this lesson out, the point that I'm making with this, in a groove like that, you can just sit right there, like sitting on that groove. Remember what I said, don't underestimate the power of just sitting there. Like sitting still on that particular thing, the intensity is naturally gonna build with that song because a song like that naturally drives by itself. You don't have to do a whole bunch of stuff. Here's another thing that people underestimate with this, and I talked about this a long time ago in another lesson that I've done about the gospel quartet drive. You can stay on one note and it still feels good. Here's what I mean. We'll take that same drive and I'm just gonna play C. Watch. So the point I want to make here with this particular thing, and this is, I'm only using gospel quartet right now to make this point, but this can go across several other genres. I know it can be used in funk music as well, where you're just riding that one groove, riding that one note. And you think, here's where the discipline part comes in, because this, again, this is a heavy lesson. Here's where the discipline part comes in. You're going to want to move. It's like everything in you is like, I kind of want to move here. But the more you mature as a bass player, you understand it's like, I don't really have to move. I'll use this one guy, Ben Real from Hulka, Mississippi. Played with the Mighty Gospel Warriors. It might be from Bruce, Mississippi. But anyway, anybody know of the Gospel Warriors? They're legendary bassists, Benjamin Real. And if somebody knows Ben, send this video to him. So, I'm shouting him out. But Ben Real is where I got that one note approach from. Those guys would sit there on a drive like that and drive all night, and Ben would just play like one note and kill, wreck shop. Every now and again he might give you something like this right here. And in gospel quartet, all we're doing here, you're playing like off that dominant, that minor pentatonic so to speak. So we're going C octave, 5, flat 7, octave, right? And that dominant 7 to that octave is quick. Boom, da, boom, da, 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 da. And that's like a very, very common quartet drive. All right, so we're going to get off gospel quartet because I could stay there all day because that's my roots. But I'm just letting you guys know. Resist the urge to move because the groove is naturally driving. It's naturally building when you're on something that simple. All right, so for the next example, I want to use this really common type of churchy, not necessarily gospel quartet, but we'll call this churchy type approach in terms of where you're doing walking bass. And this song is in the key of E flat. This particular loop that I'm going to be using is in the key of E flat. And all we're doing here is walking, going back and forth from the 1 to the 4, and we're going chromatic. And we're just going to stay there, and you can use that same thing, but we're going to talk about how we can build in that as well. All right. All right, so as we hear with that song, that's very common in like gospel communities, the black church, so to speak. Well, some people have a lot of trouble trying to figure out what to add to that because there's so much going on in that particular groove. Now, the thing I would say with that one would be point number 2, grow gradually. That means don't try to come out of the gate swinging. If y'all in the vamp, if you're in a church that playing this kind of groove, chances are y'all gonna be there for a while. So don't give off everything within the first few bars of it. Let it grow gradually. And one of the things I would do to let this grow gradually is start using my octaves. So how I'm moving, so if I'm starting on my E flat to my 4 to my octave, back down to my 4, I'll use my lower register to get back to that E flat. So everything so far is contained within those 3 registers. So the mistake that I see some bass players do is they start moving around too soon instead of letting it be a gradual build, letting it be a gradual thing where you're getting to that next little phase, so to speak, of that build. And so now what I'll do is I'll put it in context. And so one of the things we can start doing, point number 3, one of the things we can start doing is kind of start moving with the music, like allowing my right hand, the rhythmic stuff, playing around with the rhythm, so to speak. I start allowing my right hand to start accent. Notice when I was playing it at first, I was playing long notes. I can shorten the length of the notes, start adding a little bit more bounce in my right hand, and that gradually changed the groove. So if we start out playing a little longer notes, this is kind of doing your gradual building thing, going back to point number 2. being mindful of what you're doing. So if I'm starting, one of the things I talked about in the lesson on last week is kind of mapping out your moves. If I'm being mindful of what I'm playing in the first half of that groove, like letting my notes be in a little longer if I want to do that, and start as I gradually build, shortening the lengths of my notes, adding a little bit more bounce in my right hand, I'll demonstrate. Playing it straight. Shorter. All right, so as I'm doing that, I'm adding a little bit more, but it's subtle. The thing is, again, you don't have to be a hero when you're driving the song. It's subtle, gradual things, because if we're in the drive, chances are, keep in mind, we're going to be there for a while. So I don't have to come out swinging. I don't have to save the world with anything that I'm doing on the bass. I don't have to try to go down and do some fancy run, get hung up, get lost, mess up the whole groove. I don't have to do that, especially if I'm not comfortable with that. Now, as the song gradually grows, then I want to start kind of moving into some other stuff. So using my octaves, now I'm going to start moving out of this block. Now I'm going to go up an octave. Right? And that's just keeping it very simple on a basic level to get to the next phase of what I want to do. So now let's move this bass line around using the other octaves. And so if you play your cards right, you'll be able to kind of catch those little things, like that little move that we did at the end. You'll be able to catch the little turnarounds on the right register. So like if we're doing those little turnarounds at a lower register, like on that lower octave, is a little bit more impactful on those little turnarounds. So now all I'm doing is I've added my rhythmic stuff that I'm doing in my right hand. I'm adding my octaves, and I'm just kind of pacing myself. Now, something else that I can do is I can go So now what we're doing is we're using the minor third. We're going 1, minor third, 5, half step to the 4. So that gives us an alternative to get to the 4. So we're going. So I'm going here once I get to my octave. I'm going octave, flat 7, 5, descending, 5, half step to the 4, walk back up to that E flat, right? So what that sounds like all together. Descending. So essentially, I'm doing the same thing up and down. The only difference that happened that you'll hear in the track is when I do my turnaround. And so I got to know when that's coming in order to get out of it. So I'm going. Right? Knowing where to get out of it at. And that just comes with knowing the progression that you guys are playing. And that's worked out. Granted, this is a track that I'm using. So I'll put it in context so you can hear what that feels like now that we're adding more to the groove. And so now what I can start doing, because at this point we've been in the song for a while, I don't want to stick to that pattern exclusively. I want to start mixing and matching the patterns that I was playing before with this new added thing that I'm doing in there. Now I'm giving myself somewhere to go as we continue to build this groove. So here we go. All right, and so the last thing I want to say you can add in something like that is your octaves, little quick octaves to get up and down when you're playing these types of things. So all of this, again, is going to add to your groove. It's going to add, you got to really work on your dexterity, like being able to move your hands around and all that kind of stuff, your fingers loosening up to be able to do this stuff. So what I would say, practice is at slow speeds. Here's what this would look like slow, adding the octaves in there. Now you can hear that little pedal thing that I'm doing on the string above. That's another thing that adds that ghost note feel. Now I'm going to tell you the thing you want to watch out for when you're doing that kind of rocking motion is you have the tendency for it to get a little cluttered or get a little muddy if you don't work on cleaning it up. So again, I'll encourage you to practice this at slow speeds. So what we're trying to do is something like this. So you could hear all of those little elements that we've been talking about being added gradually. I'm not trying to push everything all at the same time. I want to kind of pace myself, add a little bit here, add a little bit there. That way I don't run out of stuff and I don't get too repetitious, even though this is a groove. And keep in mind the thing that we talk about, never underestimate the power of sitting there on that groove. So in 1 minute, we can just be playing, adding absolutely nothing but the meat and potatoes. And later on, we can grow and build, but we can always go back to that one thing we were playing as the song is driving. And as long as you're not losing intensity on how you're attacking the notes, it's still driving the song. All right, so let's give an example. Regular. Adding. Regular. And so you guys heard what I was doing there, and keep in mind the whole thing we talked about last week. When you make mistakes, learn how to get out of those mistakes. Keep it moving. Don't allow that mistake, because I had one there. Don't allow that mistake to take you completely out of the game where you say, oh man, like, because at that point you lost. But if you can focus and keep going, I got to get through the end of this. because it's going to happen. Your hands are going to get tired, but you got to figure out ways to do it. And the best way I could tell you to do that is by just repetition of doing it over and over again, practicing those different patterns. All right, guys, so that's it for this lesson. If you want more, be sure to leave it in the comments, because there's more that I want to share on this particular topic, but I want to make sure you guys want to know it. So be sure to drop, hey, give another video, and I will share that for you guys. Hopefully this has been helpful for y'all, and I'm Jermaine Morgan. I'm out. Peace.